our break is tort court. Yesterday we did international tort law issues, and today we are going to continue on with tort court. Now I'm just going to go over tort law generally, if this is an area that's new to you, and then as we go along, I'll go into torts that are specific to tort. Now, tort is similar, it's personal injury law. It comes from the word in Latin to twist or twisting. And tort lawyers are often referred to as plaintiff lawyers. And tort law falls under civil law as opposed to criminal law. But as we go on, when we talk about intentional torts towards the end, you'll see how some torts can also be crimes as well. So it's one thing can be a crime, but also a tort. The goal of tort law is to compensate the injured person for the injuries that they have sustained. Now, these are just to keep in mind because, again, these paralegal power breaks are extremely short. They're just meant to provide you with useful information in a short period of time. So I'm just scratching the surface here. But you can purchase the text, Tort Law, to go into tort law in more detail. Now, a plaintiff, when you're dealing with tort law, a plaintiff must prove a case. This is civil. This is in any civil case. The plaintiff must prove their case by a preponderance of the evidence. There are 4 major tort theories, but these are not mutually exclusive, meaning that you can't have more than one of these. They're not mutually exclusive. There's negligence, which we'll talk about today, intentional tort, product liability, strict and absolute liability. So those are the 4 major tort theories. Now, negligence. Negligence is the failure to act as a reasonable person would. So this is the standard for a person. Now, so the question in the case would be, well, how would a reasonable person have acted in that situation? And so when determining who this reasonable person is, because this is a fictitious person, a judge or a jury is the trier fact. They're the decider, the person or the group that is deciding and determining what this reasonable person's standard is for that particular case or that particular scenario, set of facts. Now, most states use comparative negligence. And comparative negligence is just when the person that's injured, what it does is it kind of chips away at their case because it says comparative negligence puts some of the blame on the person that was injured. Now, outdated defense involve phrases such as contributory negligence, meaning that there is something that was done that by the person that was injured. So again, contributory negligence is if the plaintiff is found to have contributed in some way to his or her own injury. Now, comparative negligence, which is sometimes called comparative fault, this is when a plaintiff may be partially to blame for their own injury. For a lawsuit or a claim of negligence to be able to move forward. There's sometimes these cases move forward and all these elements are not met for some reason or the other. But for the most part, for a claim of negligence not to fail, all of these elements must be there. It must have been met. First, there has to be duty of care on the part of the defendant, breach of duty, so breach of that duty to care, causation or the proximate cause, the injury was a cause of this. There's some type of damages, injury, whatever. There's something that occurred because of this breach of duty. Now, if any of these are missing, now look at this word here carefully, should. the claim should fail. Does not mean it will, but it should fail if all of these elements are not met. Now, there's levels, just like there's categories of tort. There's levels of negligence. Negligence in general is just a failure for a person to act as a reasonable person would. And reasonable person standard is set by a judge or a jury. Now, gross negligence is the failure to even use a small amount of care. So this, whatever occurs, it's just grossly. It's not even a reasonable person. It's just when someone looks at it, a judge or a jury, it's just ridiculous. It's like, wow, no, that just falls way outside of any type of reasonable person or any type of care, anything. So it's just grossly negligent. Many have what's called recklessness. And this is so lacking in care that one can construe the conduct intentional. So we'll talk about intentional torts and how those actually hinge on criminal behavior. And then you have punitive exemplary damages. So these are most likely in recklessness cases. So punitive damages are when a judge or jury awards over and beyond. So they may compensate the person being injured for, let's say, medical expense, loss of their ability to work, for a short period of time or for their lifetime. They're compensating them. They're making them whole. They're putting them at, meaning the judge, when I say there, the judge or the jury is putting the injured person, party, to a place where they would have been if this incident had not occurred. They're making them whole. Now, that's where the person is getting for being injured. This is, pretty much standard. Now, punitive damage is like over and beyond. It's like, with the recklessness, it's like a judge or jury is looking at the incident and they're outraged. They get outraged. A lot of times, punitive damages are awarded when a judge or jury is trying to set an example. It's just outrageous. And a injured party will not only get damages to make them whole, they will also get punitive damages, one, to either punish the person that, injured them, to set an example, or, they're just so outraged or whatever happened that they award punitive damages. Now, in sports, so, I've talked about negligence in general, because negligence, these are claims against private parties. This can happen anywhere, these claims. Someone can get injured in a grocery store. Someone can get, injured by a neighbor, whatever the case may be. But now we're going to talk about negligence in sports. So you can have spectators. People will be talking about a case tomorrow, so the Power Break tomorrow will be specifically discussing a case. So you want to go over to the blog and register for that, because we'll talk about a particular case where a spectator was injured at a sports game. And so we'll go through that particular case. But there are participant or athlete injury. When there are certain sports, boxing, a lot of these sports, people are getting injured all the time. Football, like these contact sports. What's another one? With hockey, boxing, wrestling. You're going to get injured. As soon as you walk into the ring at a boxing match, someone's going to get injured. That's, those are those contact sports. So, to get injuries, you also have referee injuries. Think of when someone's playing hockey, the athletes, they get into a fight, and the referee might try to break it up, whatever the case may be. Or in another sport, a referee is trying to bring peace first, just a yelling match, and then the referee, right as the referee interferes, it turns into a boxing match. So that's where the referee can get injured. That can turn into a claim. Coaching injuries, the coaches can get injured. Death by spectators or participants, these are called deaths. And I mentioned before where some torts can now hinge on crimes as well. And then you also have malpractice in sports, where you have the doctors or trainers that may, let's say, for instance, a player may have an injury, and the trainer may say, oh, you're fine, you're okay to play. and the players go and they play, and they actually get whatever this injury was, it becomes worse because of it. So now you have a malpractice, may have a malpractice claim against a doctor, a sports doctor, a team doctor. Now, in mind when you're dealing with negligence in sports is what role does the insurance play in the analysis, if at all? So these are some questions, you can ask yourself and do some research on as well after today's session. What about waivers? Because a lot of tickets, some people may not realize that these are there. A lot of people most likely don't, but a lot of tickets have waivers on them. There's disclaimers, releases, exculpatory clauses, some ticket stubs. What about minors and waivers? Like when children are playing sports and their parents sign a waiver. Are these held up? The ones on the ticket stub, those are said not to really be, not to really hold up, because the person purchasing a ticket in no way intends to waive their rights. What about statute of limitations for personal injury in sports? Injuries that are arising out of the course of employer, like employment, like workers' compensation issues. When people like boxing, a person knows that they get injured, period. Not like baseball, something may happen, a person, get struck with something, a ball in the head or whatever the case may be. But some of these sports, a person knows that injury is going to occur. Boxing, wrestling, some of these other types of contact sports. So, some things to keep in, to think about and consider, maybe do some further, are things like, the course of employment, workers' compensation issues or, waivers, on tickets and insurance analysis, insurance and how that plays a role in negligence claims. Now, these are mostly associated with criminal law. I mentioned in the beginning that these torts can hinge, they can also be crimes as well. Some are crimes and torts, like assault, battery, defamation, libel and slander, intentional interference with contractual relationships, false imprisonment. These are all intentional torts. Fraud, the invasion of privacy, commercial, which is also commercial misappropriation, and so on. These are all intentional torts. So how do they relate to sports? And what is the relation when you're dealing with contact versus no contact sports? So these are all things to consider when you are dealing with torts and sports. Now, this can occur when, a team purchases equipment and there's an injury and it said that this injury was sustained due to a defect of the equipment or something that was purchased, a defect in the design, defect in manufacturing, or a defect in warning. And the question is to consider is how and when did this occur. Now, you also have strict liability, which is this is very rare in sports because in strict liability, it does not look at the duty, any degree of care. It's pretty much that it's a very high standard. So let's say, for instance, under this theory, a seller of sporting good is liable for any harm that is caused to a plaintiff due to a defective condition unreasonably dangerous to the user or consumer. Now, this is uncommon because this is a very high, with a strict liability, with those elements that we looked at previously, some of them could be there. It works actually in the favor of the plaintiff. So, but this is really rare in sports. Most of these claims fall under negligence claims. Now, this will hold the defendant responsible no matter what degree of care that they use. We talked about earlier the duty of care. So it holds them responsible regardless. It doesn't look at, these particular claims when the liability is brought. The defendant cannot, defendants and claims they bring defenses, we talked about contributory negligence and comparative negligence, duty of care, and some of these elements needing to be there in existence for a claim not to fail. Well, with this strict liability, the defendant is responsible regardless of what degree of care they use. Like use for demolishing projects, housing wild animals, storing and transporting dangerous chemicals. You might want to think of some in sport. We talked about damages earlier. There's general damages. You have special damages, compensatory damages. We talked about punitive damages. This is usually when the court is trying to send a message or trying to punish someone because of some, egregious behavior. And just to go back on the intentional tort, before we wrap it up here, because I think we're going to run out of time here, to go back to intentional tort, this is when an individual, just to summarize this, is when an individual intends to bring about an injury to another. This is when it's an intentional tort. So a lot of these torts include assault, battery, defamation, and the main difference from intentional tort and negligence is that the person may be considered. So this is similar to intent or mens rea in criminal law, where you're looking at, or the judge or jury is looking at, the person's motivation. So keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do is wrap this session up. Here you can see the contact information. You can reach out on our website, rainmaker.com. There is a contact button on the lower right hand of the screen. Best way to reach out. You can also reach out by email, info@rainmakersonline.com, by phone. Also consider purchasing a text to learn more about sports law from Engage Money. Thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your day. And hopefully you register, if you have not already, for tomorrow's session, which we will be going over a specific sports law case, and you can access that law. Go under Paralegal Power Break and click on Paralegal Power Break Sports Case Law, and you can read the text to that. Okay. Thank you for your time.